My dad raised his glass and said, "Only one of my daughters deserves to be here." Then everyone laughed, including my sister. I stood there alone, champagne in my hand, after planning every detail of her wedding, and he turned me into a punchline. But the worst part? The $22,000 venue bill I didn't know was in my name. I wasn't just humiliated, I was robbed. And not just of money. That night, I walked out with nothing. Not even an apology. But what they didn't know was I'd go back, and I'd buy the venue. And the next time they showed up to party, it was my mic, my rules, my turn. But before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. My name is Noelle Whitaker, and I'm 34 years old. As a corporate event planner, I spend my days orchestrating other people's perfect moments from my downtown office, then return each evening to my meticulously organized condo, where even the throw pillows have their assigned spots. My younger sister Lila, our father's clear favorite, just announced her engagement to Brad after dating him for 6 months. She's always been the sparkly one, the daughter who could charm her way out of anything while I stayed in the background, making sure the details were handled. Our father Richard called yesterday about Lila's wedding. "You'll help with the planning, of course," he said, not really asking. My fingers tightened around the phone as I remembered every missed birthday, every dismissed achievement. I have a gift for remembering things others forget. Names, dates, promises made and broken. But let me start from the beginning. The October morning glowed golden through Belmeadow Hall's arched windows as I moved through my final checklist. Everything had to be perfect, not for me, but for Lila. My blazer sleeves were rolled up, and my clipboard had more crossed-off items than blank spaces left. "The florist needs to adjust that archway," I muttered, making another note. The white roses weren't cascading quite right, and I knew Lila would notice. She always noticed the flaws, never the effort. Remember those summer afternoons when we were kids stringing daisy chains in the backyard? Lila would wear hers like a crown while I carefully pressed mine between book pages, preserving the memory. "Noelle!" Lila's voice rang from the bridal suite. "The champagne's getting warm," I signaled to Marcus, our best server, who hurried off with a fresh bottle. Through the doorway, I caught glimpses of Lila in her designer gown, phone raised for selfies while her bridesmaids cooed around her like perfectly coordinated doves in blush pink. "Who arranged all this?" one of the bridesmaids asked, gesturing at the elegant room transformation. Lila barely glanced up from her phone. "Oh, Daddy's team handled everything. They're just amazing." My chest tightened, but I kept moving. The ceremony space needed one final check. Each golden Chiavari chair was perfectly aligned, the aisle runner smooth and wrinkle-free. I'd spent 3 sleepless nights negotiating with vendors, juggling payments, and calling in favors that had taken years to build. "The sound check, please," I called to the DJ, who gave me a thumbs up. The first notes of Lila's processional filled the space, the same song our mother used to hum while baking. Another detail I'd remembered. Another gesture that would go unnoticed. My father swept past me in his tailored tuxedo, heading straight for the bridal suite. "Princess," he called out, "you look absolutely radiant." I busied myself adjusting a centerpiece that didn't need adjusting. The hours blurred together as guests arrived and the ceremony unfolded. Every time someone praised the details, the hand-calligraphed place cards, the timing of the sunset photos, the seamless flow from ceremony to cocktail hour, their compliments were deflected to the professional team or Daddy's connections. Finally, dinner was served. I stood near the back wall, watching the room sparkle exactly as I'd envisioned it. The candles caught the crystal perfectly, creating tiny rainbows on the ivory tablecloths. My feet ached in their sensible heels, but I'd done it. Despite the last-minute vendor crisis, despite the budget shortcuts I'd covered from my own savings, despite it all, the wedding was flawless. The gentle ring of silver against crystal cut through the dinner chatter. My father stood, champagne flute raised, his signature charm turned up to full wattage. "When I look at my daughters," he began, and my spine straightened automatically. "I see such different paths." His eyes swept the room, landing everywhere but on me. "One of my daughters is everything I dreamed of, beautiful, charming, the kind of woman who lights up every room she enters." Lila preened, Brad's arm wrapped around her shoulders. "The other—" My father paused, his lips curving in what others might mistake for a fond smile. "Well, every circus needs a clown." The crystal flute trembled in my hand as scattered laughter rippled through the room. 200 pairs of eyes seemed to find me all at once, some sympathetic, most amused. The champagne I'd carefully selected suddenly tasted like vinegar on my tongue. Lila's tinkling laugh cut through the murmurs. She was looking right at me, her expression a perfect blend of mock sympathy and barely concealed satisfaction. I stood there, frozen, as my father continued his speech. The words blurred together, but the damage was done. All those nights of planning, the endless details, the thousands I'd spent, reduced to a punchline at my own sister's wedding. My glass shook harder, champagne threatening to spill onto my carefully pressed navy blazer. I walked out mid-sentence, my steps measured and quiet. No dramatic exit, no slamming doors, just a slow fade into the background. Like always. The October air hit my face like a slap, and I welcomed it. My lungs burned as I sucked in deep breaths, trying to steady myself against the brick wall of Bell Meadows' service entrance. The same wall I'd leaned against 2 days ago, directing the florist's early morning delivery. My phone buzzed, then buzzed again. OMG, so awkward. Are you okay? That was harsh. Uncle Jim is such a dick sometimes, lol. I switched it to silent and dropped it into my blazer pocket. The reception music thumped behind me, muffled but persistent. Like my heartbeat, like the voice in my head screaming that I should have known better. Remember when we were kids and Dad would parade us around at family gatherings? Lila dancing and telling jokes while I stood quietly by the punch bowl, making sure everyone had enough cookies. Some things never change. My heels clicked against the concrete as I started walking. No destination in mind, just away. The street lamps cast long shadows, and passing cars threw occasional headlight beams across the manicured lawns of Bell Meadows grounds. I'd chosen this venue specifically for its classic architecture, its reputation for elegance. Now it felt like just another pretty cage. No one came after me. No concerned mother of the bride, no sympathetic aunt, no guilty father. Just the sound of my own footsteps and the distant echo of celebration. The week that followed passed in a blur of client meetings and forced smiles. I buried myself in work, scheduling back-to-back consultations until my calendar looked like a game of Tetris. Anything to avoid thinking about that night. Then the mail came. I sorted through it at my kitchen counter, coffee going cold beside me. Bills, magazines, junk, and a thick envelope from Bell Meadow Hall's accounting office. Probably just receipt copies for my records. The letter inside made my coffee cup freeze halfway to my mouth. Final notice, outstanding balance, $22,000. My name, my signature. But I hadn't. I grabbed my phone, fingers shaking as I dialed Bell Meadows' accounting department. Yes, Ms. Whitaker. The accountant's voice was crisp, professional. The contract was signed 3 months ago. You're listed as the primary responsible party. There must be some mistake. My voice sounded hollow, distant. My father. He handled all the financial arrangements. I'm looking at the paperwork now. Papers shuffled in the background. Your signature is on the dotted line. Mr. Whitaker assured us you'd be handling the payment details given your experience in event planning. Of course he did. The initial deposit was paid, she continued, but the remaining balance is significantly overdue. We've sent several notices to the address provided. My father's address, where all the wedding mail had gone. If we don't receive payment within 30 days, we'll have no choice but to pursue legal action. The room tilted sideways. $22,000. My emergency fund wouldn't cover half that, and my name, my professional reputation, was on the line. I need to look into this. My voice cracked. Can you email me copies of everything? I hung up before she could respond. The phone slipped from my trembling fingers, clattering onto the counter. They'd used me. Again. But this time, they'd gone beyond emotional manipulation. They'd legally trapped me, probably assuming I'd just handle it quietly. Like always. Keep the peace. Be the good daughter. My hands shook so hard I couldn't even pick up my phone to call them. To demand answers. To scream or cry or beg. I wasn't even sure which. The morning sun streamed through my kitchen window, catching the crystal vase on my windowsill. A wedding gift I'd given Lila, identical to the ones that had decorated every table at her reception. Delicate, expensive, purchased with my own money, while they'd apparently planned to stick me with the venue bill all along. The next 2 days felt like drowning in slow motion. I barely slept, my stomach churning with a mix of betrayal and panic that no amount of ginger tea could settle. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that contract with my signature, the one I'd apparently signed for convenience during one of the countless wedding planning meetings. You know that moment when you realize you've been playing checkers while everyone else was playing chess? That's how I felt scrolling through months of emails, looking for any hint I'd missed. There were dozens of messages about flowers and table settings, but somehow, the financial arrangements had always been discussed offline. Convenient. I'd planned corporate galas worth 6 figures, negotiated with Fortune 500 executives, but my own family had played me like an amateur. The irony would have been funny if it weren't making me physically sick. My lawyer's office smelled like leather and lemon polish, the kind of place that screamed expensive news incoming. Sandra, my attorney, reviewed the documents with the kind of frown you never want to see from a legal professional. "Unless you can prove they forged your signature or coerced you," she said, tapping her pen against the contract. "This is legally binding. Did you read it before signing?" I had. Sort of. Between coordinating vendors and managing Lila's constant crises, I'd skimmed it. Dad had assured me it was just for the venue's records, since I was handling the logistics anyway. "They knew exactly what they were doing," Sandra continued. "Your father's name isn't anywhere on these documents." The leather couch in my living room caught me when I collapsed that evening, still in my work clothes. My phone showed 3 missed calls from the venue's accounting department. $22,000. It might as well have been $1 million. Remember those ceramic piggy banks we had as kids? Mine was always fuller than Lila's. Every birthday check, every summer job dollar carefully saved. Old habits die hard. But even my emergency fund couldn't cover this without wiping out everything I'd built. The phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Noelle, this is Jeanette Kessler from Bell Meadow." My throat tightened. "If this is about the payment..." "It's not." Her voice was warm, careful. "Well, not directly. I remember you from the wedding. You were here at dawn, directing the florist. Stayed until midnight making sure every detail was perfect." I pressed my fingers against my eyes, fighting tears. "I try to be thorough." "You were more than thorough. You were exceptional." A pause. "And I saw how they treated you." The sympathy in her voice nearly broke me. "I can't pay the bill right now," I admitted. "But I will, somehow. That's not why I'm calling." Papers rustled on her end. "Bell Meadow is in trouble. The recession hit us hard and wedding venues are struggling everywhere. I need a partner. Someone with vision, business sense, and industry connections." I sat up straighter. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I need to sell 51% of Bell Meadow, fast, before the banks force a full liquidation." She took a breath. "And I'd rather sell to someone who understands both the business and the heart of what we do here." My mind started spinning numbers before she finished speaking. "That's a major investment." "It is. And risky. I won't sugarcoat it. We'd need to turn a profit within 90 days to keep the banks happy." Her voice softened. "But sometimes the best revenge is success, especially in this industry." I opened my laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "What kind of numbers are we talking about?" For the next hour, Jeanette laid out everything: the venue's finances, the market challenges, the potential opportunities. My spreadsheet grew column by column, possibilities expanding with each entry. When we hung up, I wasn't crying anymore. I was calculating. $22,000 in wedding debt would become a footnote compared to what I was considering. But for the first time since that toast, I felt something other than nausea. I felt hungry. My fingers flew across the keyboard, mapping out scenarios, contingencies, projections. The sun had set hours ago, but I barely noticed. Each number I typed was another brick in a foundation, not just for a business, but for something bigger. The next morning, I met Jeanette at Bell Meadow before sunrise. The empty venue felt different now, like a sleeping giant waiting to be awakened. My heels echoed on the marble floors as we walked through the grand foyer. "Most people see just another wedding venue," Jeanette said, gesturing to the crystal chandelier above us. "But you see the potential, don't you?" I did. Where others might notice dated wallpaper, I saw opportunities for modern textural panels. The tired carpet in the bridal suite? Perfect for a luxury vinyl refresh. Even the garden needed just the right touch, some strategic lighting, maybe a pergola for intimate ceremonies. "The bones are incredible," I said, running my hand along the carved wooden banister. It reminded me of my grandmother's house, that same solid craftsmanship that spoke of history and permanence. But we'd need to modernize without losing the charm. Jeanette smiled, crow's feet crinkling at her eyes. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Too many buyers want to gut everything, turn it into another soulless event box. We settled into her office, a cozy space with windows overlooking the rose garden. The morning light painted everything in soft gold as we spread out the paperwork. I'll be honest, Jeanette said, tapping a stack of financial reports. The numbers aren't pretty, but the reputation is still strong. People remember their Belmeadow weddings. I nodded, scanning the documents. What's your bottom line for the 51%? When she named the figure, my stomach dropped. Even liquidating my entire investment portfolio and emergency fund would only cover half. But I knew someone who might help. Caroline Matthews, my first boss in events planning. She'd been trying to diversify her investment portfolio. Give me a week, I said. I might have a silent partner in mind. That week was a blur of meetings, phone calls, and number crunching. Caroline met me for coffee, listened to my pitch, and asked all the right questions. When I finished, she sat back and studied me. You're not just buying a venue, she said. You're buying your freedom. Is that a bad thing? She smiled. It's the best reason I've heard all year. I'm in for 30%. The paperwork took another 3 weeks. Every signature felt like another step toward something bigger than revenge, though that part still simmered beneath the surface. Finally, on a Tuesday afternoon, I sat across from Jeanette with a cashier's check and a stack of contracts. Before you sign, Jeanette said, her face serious, there's something else you need to know. The bank has given us 90 days to show profit. If we don't hit their targets, the deal reverses. My pen froze above the signature line. 3 months? I know it's tight, but you've got the skills, the connections, and more importantly, you've got something to prove. She was right. I signed. That night, I stayed late at Belmeadow, walking the empty halls with a notebook. Every corner held possibility. I started a list. Update the website, refresh the vendor partnerships, create Instagram-worthy photo opportunities throughout the property. By midnight, I had a full marketing strategy mapped out. Back home, I opened my laptop to start on the social media revamp. A notification popped up on my phone, a wedding planning app I'd forgotten to delete. Lila and Brad's out-of-towner reception, RSVP now. Belmeadow Hall. My fingers gripped the phone tighter. Of course they'd book Belmeadow again. It was the it venue in town, and Lila never settled for second best. They had no idea who owned it now. The date was exactly 6 weeks away, right in the middle of our 90-day window. I opened my calendar and created a new event. Then I texted Jeanette. Just got an interesting booking. Let's talk tomorrow. The adrenaline coursing through my veins felt different this time. Not like the panic of discovering their betrayal, but something cooler, more focused. They thought they could use my name on contracts? Fine. Now I had something better. My name on the deed. The booking request landed in my inbox on a Tuesday morning. My finger hovered over the delete button for exactly 3 seconds before I switched to my professional voice and typed, "Thank you for choosing Belmeadow Hall. We're delighted to host your celebration." I hit send and leaned back in my office chair, letting out a slow breath. The venue's antique grandfather clock ticked steadily in the corner, grounding me. Through the window, I could see the garden where, just months ago, I'd arranged Lila's wedding flowers in the scorching heat while she lounged in the air-conditioned bridal suite. "You're sure about this?" Jeanette asked, appearing in my doorway with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "Their deposit just cleared," I said, turning my laptop to show her. $20,000. Enough to cover the catering deposits for the Miller and Chen weddings next month. She set my coffee down. Cream, no sugar. Just how I'd mentioned once in passing. Smart. Using their money to secure our future events. Poetic, isn't it? I took a sip, remembering how my father had always criticized my wasteful coffee habit. They think they're just booking another party. That afternoon, I pulled out my personal files, a habit I'd developed after years of being the family record keeper. Every receipt, every transfer, every small favor they'd asked of me. The evidence of their manipulation filled an entire accordion file. I spread them across my desk like playing cards. Unpaid invoices from the first wedding, screenshots of texts promising reimbursement, bank statements showing thousands drained from my accounts. Remember how they laughed at Dad's toast? They wouldn't be laughing soon. I opened my event planning software and created 2 parallel timelines. The first, the perfect family celebration they expected. Premium bar package, upgraded linens, that ridiculous champagne tower Lila always wanted. The second timeline was mine. A carefully orchestrated revelation. The chandelier needs to be lowered, I told our maintenance team the next day, standing in the grand ballroom. And I want spotlights installed here, and there. The same room where I'd stood frozen during that toast. Now it would be my stage. Going all out for this one, Jorge, our lead technician, commented as he made notes. You have no idea. I spent evenings reorganizing the venue's digital archives, creating a presentation that would run on our new screens. Photos from the first wedding, receipts, contracts, all perfectly documented. The same obsessive attention to detail that made me an excellent event planner now served a different purpose. My phone buzzed with a text from Lila. Getting so excited for round 2. Brad's whole family is coming this time. Can you believe Dad insisted on Bell Meadow again? It's like our lucky charm. I texted back a simple, "How wonderful," and added a heart emoji for good measure. In my calendar, I marked off the days. 42 until the reception. 41. 40. Each morning, I arrived early to oversee Bell Meadow's transformation. We updated the sound system, installed modern lighting, and refreshed the decor. All improvements that would serve future events while setting the perfect scene for this one night. The RSVPs rolled in steadily. Brad's entire family confirmed. Good, fresh witnesses. Several of Dad's business partners, too. The guest list read like a who's who of everyone who'd ever bought into their carefully crafted family narrative. Your sister sent over her song requests, my assistant mentioned one afternoon, dropping off a printed list. At the top was the father-daughter dance song from the first wedding. Perfect, I said, adding it to my growing file. Keep it exactly the same. 2 weeks before the event, Lila and Brad came for their menu tasting. I made sure to be off-site, letting my staff handle everything. They reported back that Lila loved every selection, especially the champagne. She'd even gushed about how smoothly everything was running. If she only knew, Jeanette said later, helping me review the final timeline. That's the thing about my family, I replied, clicking through our presentation one last time. They never look past the surface. They'll walk in expecting another perfect party, another chance to shine. Instead, I closed my laptop, remembering the sting of that night, the hollow feeling of walking out alone. But this time would be different. This time, I wasn't the one being played. Lila's final RSVP update came through that evening. Just confirmed the last few guests. Everyone who matters will be there. Can't wait. I saved the message. She was right about one thing. Everyone who mattered would be there. And they were about to see exactly who my family really was. I arrived at Bell Meadow at dawn, watching the sunrise paint our windows in soft gold. The same windows I'd stared through that night, feeling invisible. Today, those windows would frame a very different story. Everything to the exact specifications? I asked Maria, our new events coordinator, as we walked the floor. Down to the last peony. She handed me the checklist. Though I still think the champagne tower is overkill. Trust me, it's perfect. I traced my finger down the list, each item exactly as Lila had demanded. The same flower arrangements as her first wedding, the same table settings, even the same brand of champagne. Like watching a play you've seen before, knowing the twist ending. Remember those school plays where you'd peek through the curtain, heart racing before your cue? That's how I felt all morning, watching our staff transform the ballroom. Every crystal on the chandelier caught the light just so. Every place card sat at the perfect angle. The stage was set. I slipped into my office around 3 to change. The black jumpsuit had been an investment, sleek, commanding, with a subtle shimmer that caught the light. No more blending into the background in pastels and pearls. I swept my hair into a sophisticated twist and applied an extra coat of mascara. The woman in the mirror looked powerful. You look like you mean business, Jeanette said, appearing in my doorway. I do. I adjusted my gold bracelet, Mom's, from before everything changed. The familiar weight steadied my hands. By 5, guests started arriving. I positioned myself behind the elegant registration table, nodding and smiling as they filed past. Most didn't even notice me. Funny how people look right through you when they're trained to think you don't matter. Lila made her entrance at 6, radiant in a champagne-colored cocktail dress. Brad trailed behind her, looking slightly uncomfortable in his tailored suit. She fluttered from group to group, showing off her ring, accepting hugs and compliments like they were her birthright. "Darling!" Dad's voice boomed across the foyer as he arrived. He embraced Lila, then scanned the room with that practiced smile. His eyes skipped right over me. Some habits die hard, I suppose. I kept my movements subtle, efficient, directing staff, adjusting place cards, orchestrating the perfect flow of service while staying just out of sight. The room filled with laughter and crystal-clear notes from the string quartet. Everything exactly as they'd imagined. At 7:30, dinner service began. I watched the servers glide between tables with military precision, placing each course with perfect timing. The murmur of satisfaction told me the food was exquisite, better than the first wedding, though they'd never know why. 5 minutes, Maria whispered, touching my earpiece. I nodded and slipped away from the main room, my heels silent on the carpet. Behind the scenes, our tech team had everything ready. Presentations queued, lighting programmed, audio levels perfect. Through the monitor, I watched Dad stand and raise his glass, preparing for another toast. My heart wasn't racing anymore. That surprised me. Instead, I felt absolutely calm, like the moment before a summer storm breaks. I adjusted my microphone, checked my reflection one final time in the backstage mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't afraid anymore. The music faded to silence. Dad's voice carried through the speakers, warm and charming as always. "Welcome, everyone, to this wonderful celebration." I took my position in the wings, watching the guests lean forward, ready for another performance of the perfect family show. Lila sat beaming at the head table, Brad beside her looking increasingly uncomfortable. Dad was in his element, commanding attention, building up to what would surely be another masterclass in public manipulation. "Time," Maria whispered. I stepped out onto the floor, my heels clicking deliberately against the hardwood. Heads turned, first a few, then more, like dominoes falling in slow motion. The confusion on their faces was almost beautiful. Dad's voice faltered mid-sentence as he spotted me. The room went absolutely still. In that perfect silence, I walked to the center of the floor, directly under the chandelier where I'd stood that night. My hand didn't shake as I raised the microphone. Not anymore. The chandelier light felt different from this angle, warmer somehow, like a spotlight meant just for me. I adjusted my grip on the microphone, savoring the weighted silence. "Before we kick off tonight's celebration," I said, my voice carrying clear and steady, "I'd like to thank the person who made all this possible. Me." The gasps rippled through the crowd like wind through tall grass. Dad's champagne glass froze halfway to his lips. Lila's perfect smile cracked at the edges. "You see, I've been doing the math lately." I pulled out my phone, though I didn't need it. These numbers were burned into my memory. The original wedding venue deposit, $12,000. Catering balance, $8,000. Premium bar package upgrade, $4,000. I paused, letting each figure land. Audio-visual services, specialty linens, extended hours fee, all charged to one name. Mine. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Aunt Caroline's hand flew to her pearls. Uncle James suddenly found his napkin fascinating. "It's funny how family works, isn't it?" I continued, pacing slowly across the floor. "One minute you're the responsible one, the one whose credit score can handle a few temporary charges. The next minute you're being laughed at during the father of the bride toast." My eyes met Dad's. He didn't look away fast enough. But numbers don't laugh. And they definitely don't lie. From the corner of my eye, I caught Lila whispering frantically to Brad. He wasn't looking at her, though. His eyes were fixed on me, his expression unreadable. Total outstanding balance from the first celebration, $22,000. I smiled, warm and professional, which coincidentally matches the exact amount I invested in my newest business venture. Right on cue, Jeanette appeared beside me. Her silver blonde hair gleamed under the lights as she raised her own microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "I'm delighted to introduce Bell Meadow Hall's new majority owner and creative director, Noelle Whitaker." The explosion of smartphone clicks sounded like summer rain on a tin roof. Dad's face went from red to white so fast I worried about his blood pressure. Lila's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. "Now don't worry about tonight's bill," I added smoothly. "Consider it covered by the previous balance, though I should mention our new pricing structure takes effect tomorrow." I consulted Jeanette's clipboard, which is particularly relevant since I see 3 more Whitaker weddings booked for next spring. More gasps. Cousin Rachel's face went scarlet. Her save the dates had just gone out last week. Of course, we'll honor all existing contracts. I paused. Assuming they're paid in full, up front. The silence stretched like pulled taffy. Then, from the back of the room, a chair scraped against hardwood. Brad stood up, his tie slightly loosened, and began walking toward me. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, all eyes tracking his movement. You know those moments when time seems to slow down? When you can feel every heartbeat? Taste the tension in the air? This was one of those. My fingers tightened on the microphone, but I kept my smile steady. Whatever was coming, I was ready. The clicking of phones grew louder. Aunt Caroline wasn't even trying to be subtle anymore, filming the whole thing on her iPad. Someone whispered, "Oh my God," loud enough to echo. Brad's steps were deliberate, measured. He looked different somehow, like he'd aged 5 years since walking in tonight. The perfect golden boy shine had worn off, leaving something more human underneath. I held my ground as he approached, chin lifted slightly. Let them film. Let them see. The old Noelle might have stepped back, might have tried to fade into the background. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone who knew exactly what she was worth. He stopped 3 feet away from me, close enough that I could see the slight tremor in his hands. Close enough to notice his wedding ring catching the light. Close enough for everyone to hear whatever he was about to say. Brad gestured toward a quiet alcove near the venue's antique grandfather clock. I followed, keeping my shoulders straight, though my heart hammered against my ribs. The tick-tock of the timepiece filled the silence between us. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The usual polish was gone, replaced by something raw and urgent. "And I need you to know I mean every word." I waited, arms crossed. The faint sounds of confused chatter drifted from the main hall, punctuated by what I was pretty sure was my father's angry baritone. "I didn't know," Brad continued, running a hand through his carefully styled hair. "Half of what they told me about you was just lies." He swallowed hard, Adam's apple bobbing. "They said you were bitter, jealous, that you couldn't handle Lila's success, that you'd tried to sabotage her relationships before." The old familiar ache bloomed in my chest. Of course they had. Why change the script now? "When I first joined the family," he went on, "they made it clear you were the problem child, the one who couldn't get it together, who needed to be managed." His face twisted with something like shame. I bought it. God help me, I just accepted their version without question. Remember how summer thunderstorms would roll in when we were kids? How the air would get thick and heavy right before the sky cracked open? That's what this felt like. The pressure of truth about to break. But watching you tonight? He shook his head slowly. The way you handled everything, the business acumen, the dignity, even when you had every right to burn it all down? A bitter laugh escaped him. Makes me wonder what else they lied about. I uncrossed my arms, letting them fall to my sides. Why are you telling me this? Because someone should. His wedding ring caught the light as he gestured. Because I'm starting to see patterns I can't unsee. And because... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Because you deserved better than what this family did to you. We stood there for a moment, the grandfather clock marking each second with solemn precision. No romantic tension, no dramatic declarations, just the quiet weight of truth finally being spoken aloud. "Thank you," I said simply. "Because sometimes that's enough." He nodded once, straightened his tie, and walked back toward the reception. I didn't follow immediately. I needed a minute to let his words settle into my bones. 3 days later, my phone exploded with texts. Brad had moved out of their perfect starter home, taking only his clothes and his golf clubs. The family gossip machine went into overdrive. Aunt Caroline alone sent 17 messages in 2 hours, each one more dramatically punctuated than the last. I was reviewing venue contracts in my new office, formerly the bridal suite, when my email notification chimed, then chimed again, and again. The first inquiry came from a local news anchor who'd been at the reception. She wanted Belle Meadow for her winter wedding, and specifically requested that amazing owner who knows how to handle family drama with class. The second was from a tech startup CEO who'd seen smartphone footage of my speech on someone's Instagram story. She loved my strategic approach to emotional justice and wanted to book immediately. But the third email made me sit up straight. James Chen, the celebrity chef whose restaurant empire spanned 3 states, had heard about my elegant takedown from his event coordinator. He wasn't planning a wedding, but he wanted to discuss hosting his daughter's Sweet 16 at Bell Meadow. His exact words, "Anyone who can turn family karma into profit is someone I want to work with." I leaned back in my chair, feeling the smooth leather against my shoulders. Through my office window, I could see the garden where wedding photos were usually taken. The late afternoon sun caught the fountain's spray, creating tiny rainbows in the mist. My computer chimed again. Another inquiry. I clicked open my calendar, already knowing I'd need to hire more staff. The weight of Brad's validation had somehow transformed into tangible success, like emotional alchemistry. I opened my booking spreadsheet and began to type. I sat cross-legged on my living room floor that evening, surrounded by stacks of family photos I'd pulled from storage. Each one captured a moment where I'd tried so hard to matter. Christmas mornings where my carefully chosen gifts were met with polite disinterest. Graduation days where Dad checked his phone during my speech. Birthday dinners where Lila somehow became the center of attention. Remember those old-school photo albums with the sticky pages? The ones that would yellow at the edges and smell like dust and memories? I'd kept everything so pristinely organized, as if perfect preservation might somehow make the love real. My phone buzzed. Another text from Aunt Caroline. "Your father is very concerned. Please call home." Home. That word didn't mean what it used to. I picked up each photo, one by one, and dropped them into the waiting recycling bin. No dramatic ripping, no tears, no ceremony. Just release. When I got to my contacts list, I didn't hesitate. Block, 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 delete. With each tap, my breathing got easier. You know what the funny thing is? I asked my empty apartment. I don't even feel sad anymore. The next morning, I walked into my lawyer's office with a business plan and a sketch pad full of dress designs. "I want to incorporate," I told her, spreading the drawings across her desk. "Legacy by Noel. Luxury bridal wear for women who know their worth." She raised an eyebrow at the projected numbers. "These are ambitious targets." "So am I." I pointed to my favorite design, a structured silk column with a dramatic cape overlay. "See how the shoulder detail creates strength without sacrificing softness? That's our whole aesthetic. Resilience meets elegance." The paperwork took less than a week. I converted my spare bedroom into a design studio, covering the walls with fabric swatches and inspiration photos. My first collection featured just 3 dresses, each named after a different kind of phoenix myth. The samples arrived just as autumn turned the trees to fire. The initial response was modest, a few inquiries from local boutiques, some positive comments on our Instagram launch. But then a fashion blogger wore our Firebird gown to her courthouse wedding and posted about it. Finally, a bridal designer who understands that women can be both powerful and beautiful. The post went viral. My phone started pinging with notifications. First dozens, then hundreds. By evening, our waitlist had over 1,000 names. I hired pattern makers, then seamstresses, then a social media team. Every morning, I walked into Bell Meadow to handle venue operations, then spent my evenings reviewing dress orders and design tweaks. Sleep became optional, but I barely noticed. This wasn't just work. It was reconstruction. The tabloids, of course, couldn't resist the story of Lila's failed marriage. "Bride of the Year's sudden split. Where's the groom?" screamed one headline. Another, "Society wedding ends in mystery. Sources say family drama to blame." I didn't click, didn't comment, didn't feed the flames. Instead, I focused on building. Legacy's fall collection doubled our previous sales. The winter line tripled them. Each design carried something of my journey. Hidden strength in seams, unexpected elements of armor worked into delicate lace. Every bride who chose our dresses seemed to understand the message. You are not what they say you are. Then came the email from Bell Meadows' facilities director. With the venue expansion nearly complete, we need to name the new ballroom wing. As majority owner, would you like to make the final decision? I stood at my office window, watching the construction crews put finishing touches on the elegant new addition. Its windows caught the morning light like cut crystal, throwing prisms across the garden path. The perfect name came to me instantly. Not something bitter or vengeful, not a reference to family or loss or even triumph. Something simpler, cleaner, more powerful. I opened my laptop and typed 2 words that said everything. The Phoenix Room. 3 weeks after we named the new wing, I walked through Bell Meadows' main corridor just before sunset. My heels clicked against the marble in perfect rhythm, a sound that had become as familiar as my own heartbeat. The grand chandelier above cast everything in warm amber, making even the simplest details feel like they were dipped in honey. You know those moments when you suddenly see your life from outside yourself? This was one of those. I adjusted the collar of my black silk blazer and checked my clipboard one last time. Guest list, vendor contracts, timeline, everything precise, everything controlled. My phone buzzed with another RSVP confirmation for tonight's showcase. Legacy by Noel's first major preview event, and we were officially overbooked. "There's my favorite business partner," Jeanette called from the entrance. She walked toward me with that graceful efficiency I'd come to admire, a leather portfolio tucked under her arm. "Ready to make it official?" "More than ready," I smiled, remembering how different things had felt the first time I'd signed papers in this building. Back then, I'd been desperate and angry. Now, I was just ready. We settled into her office, the one that would soon be mine. Jeanette spread the final ownership documents across her desk while explaining the terms, but I barely needed to listen. I'd memorized every clause, every condition, every carefully worded transfer of power. This wasn't just about buying a venue anymore. This was about claiming space. "Sign here," she said, pointing to the marked lines. "And here, and one more here." My pen moved smoothly, decisively. No hesitation, no doubt. Just the quiet scratch of ink marking endings and beginnings. "Congratulations," Jeanette said, gathering the papers. "Bell Meadow is all yours." I stood and hugged her, something I rarely did with anyone. "Thank you. For everything." "Oh, please," she waved me off, but I caught the slight shine in her eyes. "You did this yourself. I just opened a door." We walked together toward the south wall where the new wing began. The brass plaque caught the evening light. The Grace Room. Not Phoenix, not revenge. Grace, because that's what I'd finally given myself when no one else would. "They're starting to arrive," Jeanette noted, glancing at her watch. "Should we get you backstage?" I nodded, straightening my shoulders. Through the windows, I could see cars pulling into the lot, fashion buyers, magazine editors, local socialites, all here to see Legacy's first full collection. The prep area hummed with controlled chaos. Models in various stages of dress rehearsal, makeup artists making final touches, my team adjusting hemlines and checking lighting cues. Everyone moved with purpose, everyone knew their role, just like I'd trained them. 5 minutes, called my stage manager. I stepped behind the heavy curtain and listened to the crowd growing louder in the ballroom. Glasses clinked. Conversations merged into that particular buzz of anticipation that comes before something new begins. My phone lit up with a text from my old mentor, the one who'd helped fund my initial buy-in. "You've got this, kid." The house lights dimmed. Music began to pulse through the speakers. Not the traditional wedding march, but something stronger, more modern, more me. "Ladies and gentlemen," our MC announced, "please welcome the founder and creative director of Legacy by Noel." I took one deep breath, touched the edge of the curtain, and stepped out into the light. The applause wasn't polite or obligatory. It was genuine. Earned. These people weren't here because of my family name or my sister's drama. They were here because I'd built something worth seeing. Lifting a champagne flute, I faced the crowd. The chandelier above made everything glow like a dream, but this was beautifully, perfectly real. "Welcome to Legacy," I began, my voice clear and steady. "Welcome to Grace." The first model emerged from behind the curtain, and I swear the collective intake of breath could have pulled the stars from the sky. My debut collection wasn't just beautiful, it was revolutionary. Clean lines met subtle strength, each gown telling its own story of transformation. You know that moment when you realize everything has changed? When the wheels finally turned full circle? From my position in the wings, I watched my vision come to life. The photographer's flashes created a steady strobe, catching every perfect detail. The hand-beaded bodices, the architectural draping, the way each dress moved like liquid confidence. My phone vibrated constantly in my pocket as social media exploded. Legacy by Noel was already trending. "They're absolutely loving it," my social media manager whispered, showing me her tablet. Industry influencers were posting reels in real time, their captions gushing about the fresh perspective and empowered elegance. One prominent wedding blogger had already dubbed it the collection that will define this decade's bridal aesthetic. I sipped my sparkling water, letting the bubbles dance on my tongue. 6 months ago, I'd been invisible. Now, I couldn't stop being seen. A text notification caught my eye. Not from family. They were all blocked. But from my lawyer. "Thought you'd want to know," it read, followed by a link to a Business Journal article. I opened it and felt my lips curve into a small, satisfied smile. My father's consulting firm was under investigation for fraud. Major clients were jumping ship faster than rats from a sinking yacht. His carefully cultivated reputation for integrity in business was crumbling like the facade it had always been. Karma really does come for everyone eventually, doesn't it? "Noelle?" Jeanette appeared at my elbow, elegant as always in her signature French twist. "The board members are here. They'd like a word." I followed her to a quiet corner of the venue where 5 distinguished-looking people waited. The chairman, a woman whose approval I'd fought hard to earn, stepped forward. "Ms. Whitaker," she began, "we've been impressed, very impressed. The numbers from the past quarter alone." She paused, glancing at her colleagues. "Well, they speak for themselves, but it's more than that. You've brought vision to this place. Innovation. Heart." My pulse quickened. I kept my expression professionally neutral. But inside, my heart was doing cartwheels. "Jeanette has informed us of her desire to retire fully," the chairman continued, "and we've unanimously agreed with her recommendation that you assume complete creative and executive control of Bell Meadow Enterprises." The applause from the runway show was still pulsing through the walls, but this was my real victory lap. "We'll need you to sign some papers, of course," another board member added. "But effective immediately, you're our new CEO." Jeanette squeezed my hand. "You've earned this," she whispered. "Every bit of it." I thought about Lila then. Briefly, like swatting away a gnat. Last I'd heard, she'd moved back in with our mother. Her perfect wedding, now just an uncomfortable story people whispered about at country club brunches. Her social media had gone quiet. No more perfectly filtered photos, no more blessed captions. She'd finally learned what it felt like to be invisible. But honestly, she didn't matter anymore. None of them did. Back at the runway, the finale dress emerged. My personal favorite. A masterpiece of architectural simplicity with a cape that unfurled like wings. The crowd gasped, then erupted. Phones lifted higher, capturing every angle. This wasn't just fashion, this was art, this was power. The model reached the end of the runway, paused, and something magical happened. Without prompting, the entire audience rose to their feet. The applause was deafening, genuine, earned. I stepped out from the wings, took my place beside my creation, and felt the warmth of the spotlight. Not as someone's daughter or someone's sister, but as myself. Noelle Whitaker, CEO, designer, force of nature. Remember how my father once said every circus needs a clown? Well, look who's running the whole damn show now. The last guest's heels clicked away across the marble floor, leaving me alone in the grand ballroom of Bell Meadow Hall. I stood perfectly still, letting the quiet settle around me like a familiar shawl. The cleaning crew wouldn't arrive for another hour. I'd wanted this moment just for myself. Remember those old movies where the heroine gets her dramatic transformation scene? This felt like that, but better, because I'd orchestrated every step of my own metamorphosis. The chandeliers above cast their soft amber glow across the empty space, creating pools of warm light that seemed to breathe with memories. 6 months ago, under these same crystals, I'd stood frozen while my father's cruel toast drew blood. Now, those same lights caught only triumph in their facets. I walked slowly toward the center of the room, my heels making no sound on the plush carpet. The fashion show setup had already been cleared away, returning the space to its usual elegant simplicity. But evidence of tonight's success lingered everywhere. A forgotten press badge here, a dropped business card there. Little breadcrumbs marking my path from invisible to unstoppable. My phone buzzed again. Probably another congratulatory message or press inquiry. I didn't check it. This moment wasn't about numbers or notifications. This was about something deeper. Remember how you used to collect sea glass as a kid? How the waves would take broken bottles and transform them into something precious. That's what betrayal did to me. It tried to shatter me, but instead it smoothed my edges into something stronger, more valuable. The mirrored walls reflected me from every angle as I moved through the space. I caught glimpses of myself, elegant black dress, perfectly styled hair, the quiet confidence of a woman who finally knows her worth. Around my neck hung my mother's old pendant, the one Lila had sneered at during our last Christmas together. "God, that's so tacky," she'd said, wrinkling her perfect nose. "You should really let me help you shop sometime." I reached up and straightened the necklace now, watching its vintage gold catch the light. Funny how perspective changes things. What Lila saw as dated, the fashion editors tonight had called timelessly chic. One even asked if it had inspired elements of my collection. The irony wasn't lost on me. While I was being celebrated in Vogue, Lila was probably sitting in our mother's guest room, scrolling through her phone and wondering where her picture-perfect life had gone wrong. And Dad? His empire was crumbling faster than his hairline. Turns out those creative accounting practices he'd been so proud of weren't quite as clever as he thought. But you know what? I didn't feel the need to gloat. Their downfall wasn't my victory. My victory was standing here, in my own venue, after my own successful launch, knowing I'd built something real, something lasting. I closed my eyes and let the silence of Bell Meadow wrap around me. The faint scent of roses still lingered from the show's decorations, mixing with the subtle warmth of beeswax from our signature candles. This place had transformed from the scene of my humiliation into the stage of my renaissance. Opening my eyes, I met my reflection's gaze in the mirrored wall. The woman staring back at me wasn't the same one who'd run out of here 6 months ago, fighting back tears. This version stood taller, smiled easier, feared nothing. I lifted my chin slightly, watching the chandelier light dance across my face. The words came naturally, not as a wish or a prayer, but as a simple statement of fact. I will never let anyone rewrite my worth again. The chandelier crystals seemed to chime softly in response, their gentle music echoing through the empty ballroom. They weren't witnesses to my shame anymore. They were crown jewels in my empire. And this time, I didn't need anyone's approval, didn't need their applause or their permission. I had given myself everything they'd tried to take away: dignity, power, success. I had rewritten my legacy in silk and strategy, in business plans and bank statements, in every no I'd learned to say, and every yes I'd earned. I believe stories like this find us for a reason. If this one touched you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day, and tomorrow's might be the one your heart's been waiting for.